I'm back. Sally on Camp Creek, part two. I'm talking about yarn. Imagine that. Anyway, my neighbor called me real quick, so I had to see what was going on. I had goats out this morning. I had to chase goats, so if the neighbor calls, I'm checking to make sure that the goats aren't, like in the highway. But yes, I'm grateful that my sister also was a yarny person. My older sister, my younger sister, I don't know if she learned to do handwork when she was a teenager. She was younger enough that I was gone and married by then. But I do believe that she does some handwork. But my older sister was avid handwork. She just did handwork all the time. And she was really good at it. And she sewed too. But she got me in all kinds of yarn trouble because she's the one who found the yarn shop in Watonga. And I probably would not knit if it had not been for her. And I'm really grateful that she encouraged me. She wanted to learn to knit. She crocheted and she did macrame and she embroidered and tried to tat. But she wanted to learn to knit. And she's the one who said, there's a class, a sock knitting class in Watonga at the yarn store, and we're going. And we did. And I was really glad. And most, if I would say all of the yarn adventures I ever had, she took me on. We went to a yarn festival one time with another friend, her and the other friend and I. And she insisted that we do some sightseeing, or we probably would have done nothing. And that was fun. It was interesting because I'm not around people who drink alcohol. We went to this craft show and this craft festival, yarn festival, wool festival, and it was in Missouri. I can't remember exactly where. It wasn't Branson, but it was in the vicinity. And we stayed at a hotel, and there were classes and speakers and whatnot. And it was a lot of fun. And it was kind of expensive, but I found out later it was really inexpensive because the next year we looked into some others and they were so expensive, and we discovered, oh, that one really wasn't very high. But they were trying to get it off the ground, and so it was less expensive. I think that was why. And then they kind of had it in another place the next year and then maybe merged with another group and didn't have it anymore. Or it was not independent. And I can't remember even what it was called. But we went, and it was a lot of fun. Well, we were never around people who drank alcohol. So in the evening in this hotel, all the knitters, and they were knitters because at that time crochet was like, if you were a knitter, you didn't claim to be a crocheter in that group anyway. Everyone brought their knitting out, and we were knitting at that time. We had learned to knit, all three of us. And they brought their knitting out, and the lights were so dim. I kept saying, how can people knit in the dark like this? I mean, I know blind people can knit, but this is really dark when there's no need for it. And the drinks started flowing, and those women, old women, young women, fat women, thin women, short women, tall women, mostly women, we're all drinking, and we were just like, oh my goodness. I wondered if it affected their knitting, but that was interesting. And we sat with them, and we did find some that weren't drinking, and we sat with them, I think, for a while. And it was interesting, but that was fun. But I'm glad we did that. That was something fun that we did. And she would say, she would always buy all the yarn for a project. Buy all the yarn, buy all the yarn. And several times for my birthday, she bought me yarn, which was fun. And one time she bought this horrible green, because I love green. She bought this awful green yarn. It was not a good color for me. It wasn't a good green color. It was like a pale lime green. And it was a little bit creamy variegated. It was that kind of dyed look, which I like. And she made me a shawl, and I wore that shawl for a long time, even though the color looked terrible on me, and I didn't really like the color. It was big and fluffy, and warm. I did wear it all the time, a lot. Um, but yeah, I was. It was. I'm grateful for that because it has been something that I have held on to and done down through the years, and taken a lot of pleasure out of it and from it, and gained a lot of insight because of it. Because when you do handwork, it is a discipline that brings with it um, maybe some insight because you are being still and your hands are busy, and maybe it gives you an opportunity to think about things, contemplation. um, so anyway, that's beneficial, and I believe it has helped me so much, and I am really grateful to my sister for encouraging it and for carting me around to those things, and making me learn to knit when I didn't really at the time want to. I remember my first attempts at knitting were so traumatic that I worked for hours on a project. It's some beautiful red yarn. It was Vanna's Choice yarn that I bought on sale, and it was really nice quality, and it was soft but sturdy and all the good things. It was a tiny bit of a fat Aran weight, which is probably my favorite weight at that time to use. And I'd made this progress on this scarf, and I messed it up, and I had to tear it back, and I messed it up again about 4 times into it, and I'd worked all evening on it. And finally, I just took those knitting needles, I pulled them out of that yarn, I threw them against the wall, and I gathered up my favorite wooden, at the time, was a Brittany hook that I had bought to commemorate a trip that I went on as a souvenir. And I crocheted that scarf. And I thought, why am I desperately trying to learn to do with 2 needles what I already know how to do with 1? Of course, I know that's not good reasoning, but that's what I told myself at the time. And then a few days later, I had my knitting back, and I was making something else with knitting needles. But at that moment, I just needed the comfort of the crochet hook. It's kind of like baking bread, And that's why I like granny squares, because they're scrappy, they're easy. If you make one and you just hate it, you make a pretty one the next time. You put them all together, and the ugly ones just aren't ugly when they're all together. They just become part of the whole. And it's kind of like your days. You have ugly days, you have boring days, you have neutral days, and you have lovely days, and you have spectacular days. And if you take all those days individually, whether they're exciting or disappointing, whatever, they are not beautiful like they are once they are made into a lifetime. So your granny squares, you have so many different varieties of color, and you just end up with some ugly squares, and you end up with some boring squares, and some are just really pretty, and some just suit you, but individually, that's all they are: a boring square, a lovely square. But once you put it together in a quilt and you look at it all laid out, it takes on a beauty in the whole that it can't have individually, even the most spectacular square. Also, instead of just being a square, now you have an object of warmth, you have a covering, you have a piece of handwork, of art, and it's a nurturing thing. When you wrap your shivering 3 or 4-year-old up in something you've made, it's nurturing. And that's, as a whole, it's that way. Days and lives are like that. Days are boring and sad and spectacular. They're just what they are. But when you look at them over a lifetime, you're like, that's a beautiful thing. The bad, the good, the ugly, the boring comes together to make a beautiful thing. That's why I like granny squares. See, I'm a philosopher. Not really. I'm just a grandma. Oh, goodness. But we have to look at things that way. You have to take the bad and the good and try to see them as a whole, because you are more than just the days of your life. I think that's a soap opera. You are more than just that. You are all of that put together. And what is God's plan in it? What is God's purpose? And what can He, even if some of the blocks and some of the days are really messed up and you've messed them up, you didn't do it right. God can take all that and He can turn it into something really beautiful. One of His favorite things to do, I have learned, is to take that which caused you the most pain and the most hurt and the most destruction, and use that destructive, all of the messed up stuff to create an opportunity for you to spread His gospel. So, for instance, if you look at a tragic event in your life as a broken, you're just a broken house or a broken chair, this was a chair, it represented your life, and now it's all broken and you have just rubble. God can take all those broken pieces and He can build a platform out of what's left that you can stand on and stand tall on and share the goodness of God because of the brokenness that you have overcome. I saw that illustrated in a sermon one time, and I don't know if that even makes sense, but in my mind I can see it, and I believe that that is really true. What we give to God, He turns into something beautiful over time, and you may not see it till you get to the other side. Right now we look through a glass darkly, it says in Corinthians. But then we will see face to face. Now we know in part, but then we will know fully, even as we're fully known. My quotes are bad, but yeah, that's the gist of it. And so what we don't understand now, we will understand someday, if we hold on to the Lord and we cling to Him, even through our trials, and we rely on Him and we trust Him and we do our very best to stay in a place of where we're listening to Him and following Him, then things will make sense one day. We'll understand it better by and by. And anyway, that's my sermonette for the day. Sermonette for a Christianette, as the preacher used to say. Yes, granny squares are like that. And I tell you, there's some really ugly ones in my basket down there. But I know that once they all get put together, that they will all stand out as beautiful one by one. They will look good in a blanket together, and they will give me a lot of warmth. And whoever's laying on the couch, that's mostly. And they'll brighten this room up because my room tends to be a little dull in here. So anyway, and I appreciate my sister, Lynn, for giving me the opportunity to do a lot of handwork down through the years that I would not have done without her encouragement, sometimes her insistence and demanding. And it was good, and I'm glad, and I'm grateful for it, and it's benefited me a lot. So anyway, on with the granny square, onward and upward. I've got to make, I don't know how many. I used to could tell you this. They're about 6 inches big when they're done. Yes. I'm going to stitch them together, so I'm only counting on about 6 inches, I believe, total. I could look, but. And so if I want a 5-foot wide blanket, and they're 6 inches a piece, that would be 10 blocks, correct? To get about a 5-foot wide blanket. 5 foot by like 6 foot or 6.5 foot. So that would be 12 is 2. That's a foot. 5, so that would be 10. And then going down the other way, I would need 12. Yeah. So 12 times 10 is however many blocks I need. 120? I don't know. See, I have to sit down with the pencil and paper, and I can't, my brain's not functioning. So anyway, I need a bunch of blocks before it's over with. And I want to get them all done so that I can lay them out on my bed and decide how they're going to be arranged so I can put them back in my basket, mix them up, and end up with an arrangement that I didn't plan on. That's always what happens with granny squares. I'll say, it's all done, and I'm like, why are there 3 red ones together? I know I arranged that so that wouldn't happen. There they are. That's another lesson. See, we think that we know best, and we arrange our days and our lives and our relationships to suit us, but sometimes God just intervenes and he says, let's just do it this way. And next thing you know, you've got 3 red squares sewn together in your granny square quilt. Anyway, I'm going to get off here. I need to go check and see if the goats got out again. See, my face is still red from chasing them. I looked out the window. I was hemming some curtains over there at the table. I looked up, and there were 6 goats looking at me. So I went in. I got a bucket. I banged on the bucket so they'd notice what I was doing. I went in the shed, and I got some grain, some cake and stuff, and I rattled it, let them see it. Then I went and opened the gate. All the other goats were up on the hill. So I opened the gate, and I took it out there, and I obviously, so they would see, spread it out on the ground. Well, of course, the goats on the hill heard it, so they come running down the hill. So I got to get the gate shut, but I want to get the others in before I shut the gate, but I'm going to end up with all the goats out instead of the 6 goats out. They're out. So I run out there with my fat little legs, and I'm trying to get behind them and run them in, and the others are coming. Anyway, I got them in, but they're not going to stay in because the electric fence is obviously grounded out somewhere. So I need to message my dear son and say, well, guess what? Goats are out. Guess what you get to do today? So I got the goats in, but my face is red. I got 1 load of laundry ready to go in the dryer, 1 load put away, my curtains hemmed, my floor vacuumed, my dishwasher filled, the bedrooms picked up, my bed made, and then I sat down. And that sounds like I did a lot, but I really didn't do that much. I've got tons more to do. My house, everything gets out, and I've got to put things away. Anyhow, but it's Wednesday. Tomorrow's Thursday, and then there's Friday, and then there's Saturday, and then praise the Lord, it's time to go back and gather with the family and have Sunday service. And we start all over again. And thus, these are the days of our lives. Anyway, have a blessed day, blessed rest of the day, and I will holler at you later. I'm going to have to tie on. I'm afraid I'm going to have to tie on for the last tiny bit of this corner. Oh well. God bless.